Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Provision and Configure Your Servers webinar. This is serves as an introduction to Otter 2.0 as well. As you may have seen, we recently shipped our second version of Otter, the V2. This is an exciting milestone for a lot of us here at Inedo because the V2 product is showing that we've got some pretty solid use cases from V1, and the product is really starting to get some legs and users involved with it. So it's exciting for us, and today we're going to do a quick overview of how you can do some of these things in Otter. But a little bit of background, I thought I'd tell you just who I am and who the speaker is. So my background, I've been a software process consultant for quite a while now, 15 years. And actually I've been doing, I use the word software process because it describes what a lot of organizations are trying to achieve. I started my career when everyone was already involved in software. Companies were already using software, strategic assets, building businesses, building processes with software. But when they were starting to really want to make the software go faster, develop better software, less expensive, better tested. And way back when, it was a lot of, let's get continuous integration, source control started. And somewhere in the past 15 years, I started the company Inedo, originally as a software consultancy. We would do custom applications and then moved more and more into software process consulting, and eventually launched a software product called Buildmaster. I see a number of you are Buildmaster users, and our first Buildmaster product wasn't all that great as far as products go, but it solved a lot of the problems, and we learned a ton of experience in learning not just the software challenges that are involved with DevOps and what we now call DevOps, but it's personnel problems, it's cultural changes, it's also changes in the way that you architect and build your software. So over the years with, most certainly with our tools, I have worked very closely with a lot of enterprises to really get them from where they are, and now we call it, especially in the past several years, a DevOps transformation. So that's what I am, and I want to share a little bit about what problems we solve and how Inedo solves them and sees the world. So at first, let me tell you a little bit about one of the challenges that we see. So we know that enterprises are powered by software. That's every company is a software company is the common phrase that we all hear. But what that specifically means is that an enterprise's software is comprised of lots and lots, hundreds of different applications. These applications are built with all sorts of different technologies: C#, Java, PHP, newer things like Node, Python, we're seeing a lot of, even Go. And different teams of developers are maintaining these applications. A lot of them use totally different processes and totally different testing methodologies as well. And a lot of that's fine because the end users are very different. Some of them are critical business applications, other of them are less important, but still, all of these different applications work together to accomplish this overall business objectives. Whatever that might be, a bank, it could be, working on developing new financial products. Airlines, it could be things like getting out new ticketing systems so that they can compete with some of the newer airlines. All of these applications work in concert because that's what defines the business processes. So, the next obvious phrase is that innovate or die, but that's the phrase we all hear, and it's cliche, but what that means is these businesses have to adapt and change their business model and the business processes, which means updating lots and lots of these different applications. It could be just one simple change to a piece of software and a ton of marketing changes, or it could be a fundamental transformation of half of the applications in the organization. But Oftentimes, the slowest application becomes the bottleneck. And it's not just one slow application, it's a lot of them. There, of course, newer applications, newer components to build are easier, but realistically, the organization can only move as fast and change as fast as their slowest application can be updated. So this is where Inedo comes in, and this is where we've seen our products and services really help transform companies. A lot of it starts with ProGit. What ProGit does, as you know, is it helps you package your applications and components. The reason for this, of course, is to make sure that you have consistency in your software and you can easily deploy it across different environments, and that whatever is built and tested is exactly what goes to production. Of course, ProGit also supports a lot of the third-party package types like NuGet, NPM. You even have Docker as well, but it's all accomplishing the same goal, which is componentizing and packaging these applications and third-party libraries so that you can move and deliver your changes to applications a lot faster. We also have Hedgehog. Hedgehog is a deployment automation tool that takes these packages and deploys them to servers in the cloud. Hedgehog is a very new product. Actually, it is coming, we're launching it quite soon. The official 1.0 will be in just a couple of weeks here. We'll be doing another webinar on it as well. But the idea with Hedgehog is that it takes the packages, these components that you've built, and deploys them to all the various servers and, of course, the cloud, using all of the reusable workflows and pipelines that we have in Buildmaster. And the whole idea with this is a self-service deployment platform for multiple teams. Otter, which we'll be spending all of the rest of the time on today, provisions and configures these servers. This is so you can not only install all the packages and components that you've componentized your applications towards, but it allows you to define sets of configuration for other purposes as well, whether that's just general infrastructure settings or whether it's for more traditional applications that you need to manage the servers for. Of course, Otter also manages servers for configuration changes and drift. That way, if there's unexpected changes or expected changes, you'll know about it and be able to easily manage it. And we also have Buildmaster. Buildmaster is our application release automation platform, and this is very similar to Hedgehog because the two products are very related, but Buildmaster is a lot more focused on applications as a whole, whereas Hedgehog is a lot more focused on packages. But all of our products come together sort of like this. The idea is that whether you're using Buildmaster by itself to maybe get source control, build it, deploy it to all your different environments, or you're shifting to a more package-based deployment model, which would use ProGit, sometimes Buildmaster, since obviously Hedgehog is still in beta, but everything moves the applications down towards servers and the cloud, and that's where Otter comes in to manage and provision it. So as far as what we're going to be covering today, the first thing is we're going to be showing how we're modeling infrastructure. I set up a fairly basic demonstration with just a couple servers on Amazon's cloud, and we'll show how that gets modeled in Otter, as well as how you can provision some of those servers using server roles. We'll also dig a bit into configuration management, which will show you how you can change configuration, manage drift, and look for changes. We'll also show how to do package management for Windows software using Chocolate. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar on the Windows side with what Chocolate is, and we'll show how it works really well with Otter. And lastly, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. I see a few questions are already coming in, so anytime you have them, please just ask them, and I will answer them either as as we go through this, or right at the end as well. So first, let's talk about modeling infrastructure. In Otter, Otter is all about managing servers. So I want to show you what it'll be like to have a simple server setup in Otter. This is our basic existing infrastructure. We've got a very basic integration server and hosted here on site, and then we have 3 servers set up in the cloud. These are just EC2 virtual servers with basically just Windows installed and IIS and of course the Inedo agent. The Inedo agent is what allows Otter to communicate to all of these servers. So inside of our software, you'll see how we are communicating to these servers. But the logical setup is like I'm demonstrating here. Otter is having a one-way connection to all of these servers so that they can be orchestrated and managed centrally. So let me switch over to Otter here. So I'm just going to log in. Otter is a web-based tool, and you can do basically everything from the website. So logging into Otter, we've got almost a bare instance. The only thing that was added so far were these four servers. As I mentioned, the int server, prod, and test server. Now, when we look at these servers, you'll see that the server is connecting using the Inedo agent to this particular Amazon address here. When you set up a server in Otter, you've got a lot of different options. You can set up using the Windows agent, which is generally recommended if you're going to install, if you're going to be working primarily on Windows, but you can also do agentless options using PowerShell remoting or Linux SSH. They all are different communication channels and just are the way that you configure the server in Otter, but ultimately, on the deployment and configuration side, it all looks the same to the end users. We're set up using AES encryption, but you can also use SSL or none if you really want it. But that's not recommended. So these servers have, you can see it, you can set up configuration, and we'll dig into that later in the demo as well. But you'll also notice that variables are going to be in a lot of the pages that we're looking at. Variables in Otter are a very, very simple concept. On a lot of these items, servers, environments, roles, you can just add variables, which are key value pairs that can contain any key, any value, and those will end up being used throughout the plans so that you can reuse the plans and the configuration a lot easier. So moving on, when you set up a server, you'll notice that the Inedo agent is used for a lot of this. The Inedo agent is actually used by all of our products. So once you've hooked up into Otter, you can easily just install Hedgehog, synchronize the infrastructure, and they will all use the same agents. The same is true with Buildmaster. It doesn't really matter which product you start with. The servers can all be communicated and orchestrated using the same agent protocol. The next thing that I wanted to go over was this concept of server roles. So server roles are what define sets of configuration for your application and infrastructure needs. In the screenshot that I've got here, we've got a number of different possible configuration names for applications. For example, you'll see everything here is HDARS. That's representing some type of application that has all, 3 different role types required. Some of these are very application specific. For example, you can presume that HDARS web is responsible for the web components, the database components of that application, whereas something like IIS server or loop logging is a lot more broad and is more of an infrastructure-based configuration. Roles are used to define these types of configuration that you can then apply to lots of different servers. You can also do role dependencies and say, for example, this web role depends on the IIS server role, and that way the configuration will always be standard across the roles. So if you say, web requires IIS server, then you'll be sure that any server that has the web role will also have all the requisite IIS configuration. How you actually provision and configure these servers is by using OtterScript. Now, those of you already familiar with Buildmaster or beta users of Hedgehog, you're already familiar with what OtterScript is. OtterScript is our DSL, domain-specific language, that we use for orchestrating and automating servers. We built OtterScript specifically for the purpose of server orchestration and automation, both for use in a tool like Otter and in Buildmaster, Hedgehog, and some of the other tools that we're coming out with down the line that use the same engine. What's really interesting about OtterScript is its tight integration with PowerShell and Shell. What you can basically do with OtterScript is the inline script execution for PowerShell statements, but also just directly execute PowerShell scripts as assets that you've stored inside of the tool or inside of another repository. So where OtterScript is a DSL that isn't as it certainly isn't a general purpose language like PowerShell, you can easily drop down to a general purpose language anytime that you need inside of your OtterScript. When you use OtterScript with Otter itself, what you do is you use OtterScript to generally declare a desired state of configuration. And to show you what that means, I've got an example here for what it would take to provision a server. So this is a very, very simple example. We've got an application called Accounts. And in order to run this application, we need to provision the server with the following configuration. At first, we need an IIS application pool named Accounts Web App Pool. That will have all sorts of different app pool configuration. But the two bits that are very simple are it has to have the .NET Runtime 4.0 and it uses a classic pipeline. Of course, we'll also need an IIS site named Accounts Web. It'll use that app pool, but it will also have a disk path that points to wherever we have the files on disks, and it'll find our port bindings so that we can have users actually access this site. Typically, this is something that we would configure inside of IIS, and I can show you very quickly what that might look like. This is, I'm remoting into one of the servers that I've configured in Otter, and to provision these in manually, you basically would just go add an application pool, type in the name, select the runtime version, the pipeline, and so on. And of course, adding a site works the same way. So in Otter, this is how we would do it. The first thing that we'll do in Otter is create a role. What the role does is defines this constant, this set of configuration that's going to apply to the servers that we want to run this on. In this case, we're going to call this Accounts Web. This role, the first thing that we're going to do is create our configuration plan. And as I mentioned too, you have more variables on roles as well. So you can use variables anywhere throughout the software that you need. When we create a configuration plan in Otter, we're presented with this visual plan editor. And what's interesting about OtterScript is that it can be developed using both this visual mode, which I'll show you right now, and also text mode. So at first, let's use the visual mode. As I mentioned, we want to start by ensuring a application pool. And this language, ensure, what it basically means is if it doesn't exist, create it. If it already exists, make sure it looks like this configuration. So let's type in our basic configuration here, Accounts Pool, and we'll give it the .NET Runtime 4.0 version, and we'll select our classic pipeline mode. Now, you'll see there's lots and lots of different options as well. All of these are the options that you would see if you were configuring an app pool from IIS. You've got the identity path process model. Lots and lots of different options. Honestly, I don't know what most of these do, but people who manage and configure IIS certainly do, and the ability to configure all of these settings are often pretty important. So that's one of the reasons we have them available as this operation in the software. So I've added the first operation, which is to configure the application pool. Now let's do our second step, which is to ensure the site. This is pretty easy to do here. We'll just say the site name is accounts. The application pool I just typed in is accounts pool. And the virtual directory path we'll say is C websites accounts. For assigning the bindings, they can get a little complex because you can assign multiple IPs, multiple host names like that. And once you learn the binding syntax, it's pretty easy. I already typed it out here, so I'm just going to go and copy paste what I had already typed in. What this is specifying is listen on any IP address, port 80, and for the host name accounts.web. Just like that, we've created our configuration plan. Now I want to show you what text mode looks like. Text mode is an exact mirroring of what we just entered in visual mode. You can switch back and forth between the two as often as you'd like. For example, if I just copy paste this operation like that, I switch right back to visual mode and I've got two copies of it. It doesn't really make sense to have two copies of an ensure operation, obviously, because we're already ensuring the site, so it'll just be totally duplicate. So I'll just go ahead and delete it, and you'll see exactly from the text mode, it's also deleted. So once I save the plan, now I can start assigning this role to servers. I can do that from individual server pages, but it's just as easy to do that from here. Let's go ahead here and assign this to test serve 1, just as an example. So when we run this plan, doing a configuration check, what Otter is going to do is it's going to go through all of the servers here and see what the state of the configuration is and how we can change that configuration. I'll explain a little bit later what drift is, but in order to deploy this configuration changes server, all we really need to do is remediate this configuration, target to all environments, and then run the configuration. What this is going to do, it's going to basically ensure that this accounts and accounts website is set up on this remote server. We can go take a look at the server now, see that accounts web role is set up and it's current. If we go, we can also see that Otter has taken note of the configuration settings as well. In this case, IIS application pool is here, and we can easily see if we were to log on to the server, we could also see that in IIS, these things were created. So let's take a look at, once you've deployed simple configuration, like a IIS application pool and a site, how can you manage the configuration after that? Well, let's think about what configuration management means. At first, what we want to do is ensure a consistent state of configuration across all of the servers. This is what we'll do using the server roles in a moment. By taking the same role, we can apply it to all of the different servers very, very easily. And what we also want to be able to do is to detect unplanned changes in a server's configuration. For example, if I were to go and change the server's configuration, it would show up in Otter because Otter would detect that the desired state of configuration that you entered on a plan wasn't nearly what it ought to have been based on the server. And lastly, the other important aspect of configuration management is the ability to manage plan changes to a server's configuration. So for example, if we need to start changing settings in an application pool, we can do that in a controlled manner using Otter. So let's jump back to Otter and see what that's like. So as we know, we we already have this role that we've applied to one server. Now we can start applying this role to all of the servers in our infrastructure. Saving that, what Otter is going to now do is go and check the configuration across all of the different servers. And we can now start seeing that these servers are, some of them are running through and starting to begin their configuration check. And what Otter's doing behind the scenes now, it's saying configuration has drifted. So this means that on our int server, the configuration there is not what was expected. Now, we know that because we can just log right into this int server and see that in IIS, there is no application pools created. So that means that we want to manually create it. That means we need to automatically create it. So to do that, what we can do is remediate it with the job. In this case, I will go back to the role itself, and I can now choose which servers I want to remediate. At first, I want to do a remediation on my integration server. I'll just do this immediately and say, let's start this and automatically fix this server and ensure that it has the appropriate roles as needed. What I can also do is go back to that role. This will now automatically execute. Now when I go back to the role, I'd also like to deploy this configuration to my production servers. So in order to do that, I'm going to select production as an environment. And of course, those two prod servers are in the prod environment. And all I need to do is set a time that's just a couple minutes from now. Oops. And we'll put that at 3. But in any case, we can set a time at any point in the future to deploy this. So for example, if we wanted to deploy this during off hours, we would have no problem doing that. Now, what's also nice is that when you deploy configuration, you can also simulate a configuration job. Now, for something as simple as an IIS application pool and a website, that doesn't make a lot of sense to do. But imagine you start having some really complicated configuration plans that have lots and lots of branching logic in it. That's where you're going to really want to make sure that that branching logic is followed and the changes that you want to make are actually made. I didn't schedule this for the future, but had I picked a future date, we could schedule this for any time as needed. Right now, when we look at our servers, what we'll see is that all servers are marked with the current configuration. So let's take a look at the one server. I'm only logging into the on-premise server, our int server here. And if I refresh IIS, we can see that Otter, through the Inedo agent, created the accounts app pool. And we also have the account site. Both of these were created when that configuration job ran. If I go and change the configuration of this, for example, let's say I log into the server to think that I want to fix a problem. Maybe it's as simple as changing the pipeline like that. Otter will automatically detect that change as it does a routine configuration run. 2 minutes ago, the configuration was current. Now, Otter will run about every hour to check configuration. Of course, that's configurable, or you can just manually check configuration of servers. Once that configuration check is finished, Otter is going to detect that the configuration drifted from our expected state. And that's exactly what we expect to happen because we changed the role on the server. Let's go take a look at the state of the execution. Seems like it's running just a little bit slow here, but it will very quickly note that the configuration is different from and gives us a state of drifted. To remediate drift, we have a couple options. What we can do is we could immediately remediate this with a job, and anytime there's a configuration change, that's certainly an option. As I mentioned, we can schedule it for the future or do it any time, but we can also configure Otter to have the servers automatically remediate drift once it's detected. This is the sort of thing that you'd probably want to do on lower servers like integration and testing. And once we set that, Otter will again do its configuration run. It will check the status of the server. And instead of just reporting on the drift, it's actually going to tell us, it will actually go and fix the broken configuration. You'll see configuration is current as of 337. If I go back to the server, it says here pipeline mode is managed. If I just hit refresh, it set it right back to classic. That's this whole idea of how automatic remediation works. Let's say that we actually want to, have this configuration be something that we plan to change and have a planned configuration change. It's very easy to do that as well. In this case, all we really have to do is go and edit our configuration plan like this. Edit our settings here. I'm going to change the pipeline mode on this to integrated. Save it. And then ask Otter to do another configuration check. This time, what we'll see on the servers page once the configuration check is complete is that all of the servers, oh, looks like I think I hit it the wrong place. Let's try this again. We'll do another configuration check. Once this configuration check is complete, Otter will go through and manage and change only the servers that are configured to automatically remediate drift. The servers that are report only, you'll have the opportunity to deploy changes on. So when we go and look at our servers now that the check is complete, you'll see we've got current, and this is because Otter automatically changed the configuration of this int server, and the rest of the ones are drifted. Of course, we can fix that by going and deploying these configuration changes server by server, or we can do it automatically, or just fix the plan. There's a lot of options that you have when managing the different configuration. In this case, what I'll do is I'm just going to go and do a remediate all servers across the board, which in this case will hit test and production servers in addition to integration as well. And you can see Otter's just running through and doing all of the configuration and setup of those servers. Now, of course, you've got a lot of options when defining configuration plans inside of Otter. So when you take a look at the operations that we have here, these are all of the built-in things. There's lots and lots and lots of things. But as I mentioned, you can also do a lot of inline PowerShell execution as well, and run PowerShell scripts, run PowerShell DSC in exactly the same manner when there's a built-in operation that's not complete. Let's talk about how you can install and upgrade software on your servers using Otter. First, the biggest challenge that you have with a lot of third-party Windows software is that a lot of times the applications rely on very specific versions of a tool or utility being installed. And when you have even just a few servers, going in and making sure that you have the right version of the software installed with the right dependencies and all of those things is fairly bothersome and also error-prone and time-consuming. This is where we see a lot of people using Otter and Chocolatey together. The idea is that in Otter, you use that declarative configuration to say, these are the packages that I want to install. And then Chocolatey will manage the installation, configuration, and upgrade of all of those applications for you. Chocolatey is a really cool software and service. And I'm going to show you, let's take a quick look at what Chocolatey is. So going back to my browser here, if we just go to chocolatey.org, what you'll see is there are a ton of third-party packages available. Of course, you can write your own packages as well, but what the folks at Chocolatey have done is put out all sorts of packages of popular third-party software. A lot of them are things that you'd install on your desktop, but there are a lot of things that go great on servers as well. One of those packages that I would like to install on our servers here is sysinternals. So the sysinternals package is a pretty convenient set of utilities if you've ever used it. If you haven't used it, that really helps you manage a lot of the process monitoring, a lot of other debug tasks that you'll need. This is why it's a really, really popular package on Chocolatey. On Chocolatey, once you install Chocolatey on a server, of course, you can just do this very simply. You go to the command prompt, like choco install sysinternals. How do you do this when you have dozens and dozens of servers? And keeping in mind, there are lots of different versions of sysinternals available as well. Sometimes you might need a very specific version of that installed. So in Otter, it's pretty simple. In this case, what we want to do is create a new role. And I'll call this particular role, we'll call it server tools. And we'll apply this role to only our production servers for now. Maybe we can add any number of servers we'd like, but all we have to do is just like we did before. We've got a configuration plan. All we really need to do is go and create the operations to edit it. In this case, let's go back to Chocolatey here. We just look for our Chocolatey operation here, and in this case we have ensure Chocolatey package. So when we're ensuring Chocolatey packages, we have a lot of options. You'll see that Otter automatically gave us all of the options available that came from that feed. So we could even use this to start searching for the packages that we want. In this case, sysinternals. We can specify a different feed URL. A lot of users will have a Chocolatey repository inside of ProGit, so this is where you'd put your ProGit repository. And we could specify a specific version, but instead what I'll do is just use the latest version of sysinternals. So ensure latest version of sysinternals and Chocolatey is installed. You'll see this is what the OtterScript looks like. Very, very simple Chocolatey ensure package. And now we'll go and save that. When we run this configuration check across the servers, it's going to come across as it's going to come across and say that the servers are drifted because these servers do not have this package already installed. So while we wait for that server check to run, I want to address just a couple questions that came through. One of them was interesting. Is it possible to track hardware configuration changes? On one hand, yes, it is, but it's not possible to remediate those changes. So what Otter has the capability to do, and I'll show this in a little bit, is collect information about a server. And this is, for example, you would be able to collect information about the RAM. You'd be able to collect information about the mounts and drives installed. And what that means is if that changed, you will get a drift alert. Otter has no possible way of remediating that because it can't add more RAM to a physical server. That's something that you could do with a hypervisor, with some integration to make sure that your virtual machines have certain RAM. But by and large, the whole idea of Otter is that it is not used to determine every single change that's ever happened to a server. That's a server monitoring tool. The difference is that Otter is used to track the configuration changes and provisioning changes that you care about through declaration. So what that means is if you want to see the mounts and make sure that those are always consistent, then you can easily do that. Otherwise, it's not going to tell you every single thing that changed. There's some tools out there like ScriptRock that's a lot more suitable to collect the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of bits of information about the server that you have and then report it. What ScriptRock will always lack is the context of what you care about the most, which in the case of Otter typically is going to be the applications and components that you build, as opposed to I want to know anytime a single thing on a server changes. That can be tricky, especially as you deploy applications. Okay, so in the meantime, we see that our role configuration has drifted, and in this case, it'll be pretty predictable. We'll see that our role, in this case, the server tool roles here, the chocolatey packages has it says that it is just not installed, and that's exactly what we would expect, is that this package simply does not exist. So if we want to, just like all of the other configuration changes, we can pretty easily install those packages on the server by remediating our drifted configuration with a JIT. So I'll do that, and now Otter is going to go, and basically you can just sort of see it's rushing pretty fast through all of the things behind the scenes, but it's running through and telling Chocolatey to install. You can sort of see it go real fast, right, in downloading sysinternals. It's going through and telling Chocolatey to install and configure, basically to do what Chocolatey does great, which is install these tools on the servers with a very, very simple way of doing it. Now, as far as packages are concerned, what's nice about Otter is Chocolatey is not the only package type that's supported. One of the most popular packages as well are going to be the packages that you create. So let's consider, for example, ProGet packages. So while we're letting Otter install those Chocolatey packages to Chocolatey, let's take a look at this ProGet instance that is set up here. It's super, super basic, right? All I've got is a single feed here called accounts. And inside of this accounts, I have a single package called accounts web. And there's not a whole lot to this package, right? The website for our demo, you can just see it's a very, very basic set of files in there to run a ASP.NET website. So to get this in, if we want to use Otter to actually make sure that the package contents, in this case, we're using Otter in a sense to deploy applications, we can simply now ensure a package. And let's do ensure package. Now, in this case, I've already configured ProGet to use what we call a resource credential. And I can show you that real quick here. A resource credential is a secure connection to a outside source. In this case, we have something called, it's a connection to Otter or to ProGet. And in this case, all I need to do here is go back to our configuration plan. I will say our target directory C websites accounts. We'll use the credentials ProGet local. That's the username and password that I've already configured. And you'll see by using that, Otter is able to query the feeds inside of ProGet. In this case, I just have accounts. So I'll click accounts, and it's also able to query the packages installed and the packages in that feed. Accounts.load. Of course, it'll also give us the versions, but in this case, we'll just use the latest version for for simplicity purposes. This is where variables could come in too. You could put a variable on a role, on a server, on anything, and put a variable value in any of these. Of course, we could also specify the server URLs differently as well, directly without doing the credential, but this tends to be the easiest. So again, looking at text mode, it's all very simple, right? Ensure package, ProGet local, accounts web. So as we save that, we'll let Otter do its configuration check in the background. And we know that what Otter is going to do behind the scenes is these servers that aren't set to automatically drift will become drifted because we just changed the configuration. The int server, on the other hand, will automatically remediate, as you just saw. It went from drifted to current. One of the interesting things that we have in Otter, and this is a new 2.0 feature, is we're a lot tighter with how we're working with packages. So Otter has the ability to collect information about the packages that are installed. In this case, using Otter, we just installed the chocolatey package and also that package, the accounts package as well. Otter will collect information about which tool, the package source, who triggered it, all those sorts of things from the local package repository on that server. And what's great is even if Otter didn't install it, that information is available. So let's go back to Otter here and take a look and see what information Otter has collected about our servers. So over here, we'll see that Otter has, first what I want to do is remediate and make sure that that accounts web package is installed on all of the servers too. If I do that, then I can show you exactly how it looks when the packages are installed. While it's looking though, we can still take a look at what Otter has collected about the servers. On prod serve 1, we can see that the chocolatey packages are installed. These are required by Chocolatey. They're sort of the core built-in packages. And also there's that sysinternals package that I installed just a moment earlier. If we take a look at prod server 2, we can now see that there's more packages installed. And here we've got Chocolatey core, but also Notepad++. What this tells us is that somebody logged on to prod serve 2 and installed those packages by hand, or maybe they did it with a different tool. We don't really know how they did it. Otter has the ability to collect all sorts of different packages. For Linux servers, you can collect Debian, you can do RPM as well. You also have the ability to collect the versions of the DSC modules that are installed. This will give you all sorts of information about the packages that are installed on servers. Let's see, that's what we have now, is this ability to link back and show you all of the different packages that are installed on our various servers. Inside of Otter, I mean, you see, there's just in this short amount of time, we were able to only cover the basics, but inside of Otter, there's a whole lot more to see, right? You've got orchestration plans to handle general automation tasks. You can use OtterScript as this general language for orchestrating servers, and PowerShell, of course, to do any sorts of recurring jobs, execute as needed, doing the scheduled jobs. All the configuration plans that you saw in Otter, of course, they're stored as a version inside of Otter itself, but you could also store those in Git and have lots more different complex configuration sets in that. We have text templating. That's a pretty powerful way to transform assets and transform files. And like I mentioned earlier, infrastructure sync with Buildmaster and Hedgehog will let you make sure that you're using all of the same, the servers that you provision with Otter, you'll easily be able to deploy to in Buildmaster. The roles, environments, and server names are all going to be consistent across the board. So with that, since we're running pretty close to time, I want to see, who has questions. We definitely have a few minutes here, and I see a handful of questions have been coming in. So, if you have any, please do that, or please do ask. At first, somebody asks, does Otter work only on Windows? Actually, Otter works on Linux as well. When you connect a server, you can use SSH. So that is your sort of gateway to Linux, Unix, or any other server that supports SSH. So the same things that we were able to do here, obviously you're not going to use IIS on Linux, but ensuring packages, installing other things, all of that's going to be available through a Linux server as well. So question about Otter licensing. So Otter is licensed by server, but we also have a pretty good free version. What we're doing with our free tools is we're trying to make really, really useful, powerful free versions. For Buildmaster v6, we just basically made it unlimited. The same thing is true with Hedgehog, and the same thing is true with Otter. But any number of servers you want in the free version. The only restriction is that everyone who logs into the tool is an administrator. That basically lets you, for a small team where everyone's a domain admin, that's totally fine. For larger teams, well, that's where you got to start buying a license and having maybe a separate instance for only your important licensed servers. Another question here is what does it take to get, what about files that are not stored in packages? How does Otter make sure that those exist? So basically, we have we have something in Otter called assets. These are basically just files that are stored inside of your, it's called a raft, an abstract configuration store. But what it basically does is allows you to store arbitrary files, text templates, those sorts of things. And inside of Otter, there's a ensure asset operation. It works exactly like the other ensure operations. It will make sure that whatever's in your repository is equal to what's on disk. This means if you change your if you change the asset on the repository, you're going to get drift. If you change the asset on the server, you're also going to get drift. Does Otter provide tools or models for users that lack operation knowledge? That is, can developers use Otter without knowledge that most operation engineers have? Yeah, I really think so, because what a lot of Otter really takes what's called this infrastructure as code approach, and it's modeled a lot after other very popular tools. The Puppets and Chefs really pioneered infrastructure as code, and the folks who built it were developers. So this way of managing infrastructure, which is these OtterScript plans that you saw, was originally built by developers who had to get that infrastructure knowledge to quickly provision servers. So what we actually see on the Otter side is the opposite question a lot more. I'm an operations expert, how much code do I have to use? That's one of the reasons we have that drag and drop editor, is because the coding ends up being a challenge. But of course, as a developer, I think that a lot of the things that that are built into Otter, the ensure site, ensure service, those basic Windows things are easy to do. Next level will be some of the more complex things that DSC offers. That will, there's a big, huge DSC library available. That's PowerShell DSC from Microsoft, and you can use Otter to ensure those same DSC assets. So you don't really need to be experts at all in infrastructure management to do the basics of infrastructure management. If you want to do 10,000 servers and crazy load balance things, I would generally recommend operations expertise. But, like I mentioned, the folks who pioneered infrastructure as code really came from a developer background. And part of the DevOps challenge is getting the dev folks to understand infrastructure and the operation folks to, learn a little bit about the code approach as well. Okay, so here's a good question. So can Otter run inside of a container on Linux, much in the same way that ProGit can? So that's a great question. So ProGit we brought to Linux through Docker, and we found that it is becoming more and more popular, and it's absolutely, well, short answer, no. We only have ProGit for Linux. We definitely want to get Otter and Buildmaster and Hedgehog onto containers. But from our experience with ProGit, our honest assessment is that Mono, which is the platform, which is the .NET for Linux, has far too many bugs in it. For ProGit, it's fine. I mean, we'll find unexpected seg faults that happen. Worst case in ProGit, you're going to have to restart the container and you won't be able to restore packages. That's super inconvenient. So that's problem, but one that we work with Microsoft who maintains Mono to fix these bugs. For Otter and for Buildmaster and Hedgehog, you know, our take on Mono, as it currently stands, it's not production ready for something like Buildmaster where it's deploying to your production servers. We do plan on bringing, on porting our tools to a technology called .NET Core, which is, you know, Microsoft's new light version of .NET, so to say. But what's great is it works on Linux. It's an entirely fresh built thing. So that will start on ProGit. We'd port ProGit to .NET Core. Then after that, we can see the stability of it, and once we see that, we can move. You know, it shouldn't be that difficult to move Otter, Hedgehog, and so on to the other platforms. But stability for this tool is really important, I think. And honestly, if the Windows tool is very stable. So, how do variables use? Because I know I mentioned it, but I think variables are a really interesting aspect of Otter. The best way to think of variables are almost like environment variables, except you can put them on any number of servers, environments. They're like a multi-layer cascading environment variable. Very convenient for, you know, you can put, you know, you can have your OtterScript pull these configuration variables and use it to control, for example, going back to that app pool, you could say, or some setting, you could say, this setting is appropriate for this type of server, this setting is appropriate for that server, and have that be controlled by a variable on the server itself. That way your configuration plan is, you know, we'll be able to use variables and control that as well. So with that said, thank you everyone for attending. I hope that this was an informative overview of Otter. Thanks.